Sato vidyate bhavo. Nabhavam vidyate sataha. Ubhayom api tristasna. Translation: which is temporary, like the summer and the winter, doesn't have any durable existence, and what is eternal, like the soul, doesn't have any destruction. Those who know the truth have attained this conclusion by deliberating on this topic. Purport: a conditioned soul, a soul conditioned by matter, cannot realize that in itself that the contact with the heat and the cold and the sensation of happiness and distress that the experience through the gross and subtle bodies is not connected to one's eternal condition, but to one's temporary condition. What to speak if the soul can imagine the eternal reality of the immortality of the soul and the relationship with God. Shri Krishna indicates that only the souls who have realized the absolute truth can do it. For these realized souls, the spirit soul is not subject to change that receive the gross and subtle bodies. Matter manifests and transforms and disappears. The spiritual is immovable and eternal. Such is the difference in between matter and the spiritual. Also, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Lord enunciates these words for those who have not attained yet this discrimination. According to the declarations of the Vedic text, the soul doesn't have truly a relationship with the subtle and the gross body, neither with the lamentation and the illusion that are manifested, simply because of ignorance. Knowing that lamentation and illusion is connected to the identification of the body and it doesn't exist with the soul that is eternal, how Bhishma and the others will be able to be killed, and why Arjuna should lament on what is not.
Om Jnana Timilandasya Ganam Jalam Shalakaya Shakshuru Meditam Jenata Ismai Shigulave Nama Namaum Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shri Mate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Sarasvati Deve Kolavani Placharine Nilveshesha Sunyavadi Plachatade Shatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadada Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Nasato Vidate Bhavu Nabhava Vidate Sata.
Srila Prabhupada in this verse gives a translation which is slightly different, but which has the same essence. We must understand that the Sanskrit words can liberate according to the sensation and the realization of the other of these senses that can be slightly different. For example, there are the commentaries of Balada Vidyabhushan. It is on this commentary that Srila Prabhupada made his commentary, but there also exists the commentary of Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and others, and through these commentaries, the meaning of the verses is perceived and explained in a little different way. That is why we can find in the Gaudiya Vaishnava's interpretations that are different of the verses according to the commentators, the Vaishnava commentators. The point is, it is in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, a point that is important, which was expressed, is that a commentary always should find a support from another commentary. And we see that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu didn't like his devotees to make commentaries, for example, on the Bhagavatam, without supporting the commentary on the original commentaries of Sridhar Maharaj, for example. He considered that this attitude was like an unchaste wife. That is why all of the Vaishnavas, they support themselves on previous commentaries. And Srila Prabhupada, he took shelter of the commentary, most specifically of Baladev Vidyabhushan. It is the nature of the Acharya to always act through example. Krishna himself explains that if he would not himself act in this way, then people would be lost. So that is why the Lord comes to teach the principles of religion in different forms, notably Srila Ramachandra. After, in the form of sweetness of Krishna, it is a little different, because actually the Lord, in this form, does not always follow the rules. That is why people are a little lost to understand the Supreme Lord. For example, he dances with a billion gopis. There are ladies that are married, but in truth, this marriage is a form of illusion. And all of these gopis are simply a manifestation of his internal energy. The souls that are conditioned cannot understand this reality, because in the material world, this situation is the worst. But in the transcendental world, it is the most beautiful and the most ecstatic. That is why the feelings that are connected to this extra-conjugal love in the transcendental world are extremely difficult to understand. In this verse, there is the point, the most important, is that the more we become a self-realized soul, and the more we become conscious of our eternal feeling, the more our eternal feeling becomes manifested within us, and the more the connections with matter are cut. The attachments, illusory attachments, by thinking that we're a mother or a father, by thinking that we're a married lady or married man, the attachments for children, for wealth, for everything disappears. Everything. All attachments disappear. And our true attachment appears. That is why in Srila Prabhupada's translation, it was interesting is that he translates that the masters of the truth have concluded that the eternity of the real and the impermanence of the illusory, and this after studying their respective natures. That means that by studying the feeling that appears, they understand that everything that is connected to this world is illusory. All these relationships, all these feelings, all this search, all that we have done, everything will disappear. It has no substance. And because their eternal feelings appear, then they realize that it is real. That is why when we associate with the sadhus, this feeling will come in our heart. Actually, this association with the sadhus is really rare to obtain. For so many lifetimes, we need to have accumulated acts of devotion to have the association with a sadhu. It is really, really, really rare. And in this association, we receive this power to understand that we are the soul, that we are different from the body. This is the result of association with sadhus. And from there, we let go of material life to accept spiritual life. The opposite, when we offend the sadhu, then we reattach ourselves to matter and illusion, and we reject our reality, which is to love Krishna, to serve Krishna. This is the result of Vaishnava Parad, of the offenses to the Vaishnava, Guru Parad, to offenses to the spiritual master. It is that we will let go of our eternal feeling to accept again a material feeling. And we see, when we accept a material feeling by identifying ourselves as a man or a woman, it solves no problems of our life. We are simply in anxiety to await for something that will never come. It is just like, we take the example, like a wart, some kind of a wart, and it burns. So we will blow on it, but it doesn't solve the problem of the illness. That means that it soothes, but it never solves the problem. To the contrary, at certain point, we suffer more. So, when someone has an intelligence, even if one is not realized spiritually, one can at least understand this, that it doesn't solve any problems. Because if it will solve problems, it will solve them eternally. It is just like a pause, and after it starts again. So, the one who has a realization on one's eternity cannot put one's faith in these temporary things. Impossible. Because actually, this lust, that when we cultivate it, that means this relationship of love other than with Krishna, brings illusion, frustration. And it's really interesting, because Krishna, in the Bhagavad-Gita, he brings really and gradually a whole succession of words to remove the illusion in his devotees. If we study the Bhagavad-Gita with faith, with devotion, we cannot fall down into this illusion anymore, because the words of Krishna are so powerful, so beautiful. And the purports of our acharyas, they put even more into light the beauty of Krishna's words. But why Krishna speaks? It's out of love for his devotee. That is why only a devotee can understand Bhagavad-Gita. That is why Srila Prabhupada, when he made his purport on Bhagavad-Gita, he called it Bhagavad-Gita as it is, because there were so many editions that were realized by non-devotees. And the devotee, the non-devotee, he doesn't have love for Krishna. So he cannot understand in the beginning in which way Krishna speaks. He doesn't know Krishna. He doesn't have a relationship with Krishna. How he could understand the words of the Supreme Lord? So these commentaries, they are not authentic because they come out of the context of the words of the Lord. That is why, without understanding this connection with Krishna, and without understanding that Krishna speaks with love for Arjuna and for all of us, because the Supreme Lord, which is omnipotent, omniscient, knows everything. when he expressed the Bhagavad-Gita 5,000 years ago, he already knew that we would study the Bhagavad-Gita because he is the Supreme Lord. So when he addressed himself to Arjuna, he knew that he was addressing himself to all living entities. And it is out of love. So if we do not approach Bhagavad Gita with this feeling that Krishna, who loves us and who speaks to us through the Bhagavad Gita, then how can we understand the Bhagavad Gita? That is why we must approach the Bhagavad Gita through the commentary of a Vaishnava. It's really important. And so, the Vaishnavas gave different approaches of Bhagavad Gita. For example, Baladev Vidyabhushana, he put everything on the aspect of devotion, just like Prabhupada. But if we observe Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary, then he has explained that Krishna spoke more on the path of karma, of jnana, bhakti, different passages. It's extremely more complicated. That is why, for example, in our congregation, we have two forms of Bhagavad Gita. One that is more accessed towards devotion on all the verses, in all the verses, and one that is more in which the commentary is resting upon the commentary of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, and which is more difficult to understand. But we must understand that the intelligence, it is something that is given by the Lord. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, he says, I am the one who gives the remembrance as well as the forgetfulness. So when we become a devotee, we are supposed to depend upon the Supreme Lord. We're supposed to depend upon the Supreme Lord and to receive from Him the intelligence. This is, we're supposed to be surrendered to depend on upon the Supreme Lord and not depend on our small strength that does not allow us to understand this eternal relationship with Krishna, that doesn't allow us to understand the true meaning of the Bhagavad Gita, because it is the Lord that speaks, that is speaking. Even if He speaks in a simple way, who can understand His words? It is impossible. Also, that is why we need the devotee to understand them. That is why there are commentaries, because the words of the Supreme Lord cannot be understood by the conditioned soul. So, Krishna gives the intelligence. How? When we approach Him by chanting His name. His name attracts Krishna. There is a pastime where one day Krishna and the gopis, they played hide and seek. And it is Radharani that was counting and was supposed to look for her friends after, like Lalita, Indulika, etc., and Krishna. And so, the games that we play, they exist in the transcendental world. Not exactly in the same form, but they exist. And so Radharani, it was easy for her to find her friends because they have a particular fragrance, a special radiance, and also a special laugh. But Krishna was not found. So she told herself, since I cannot find him, I will attract him. And Krishna is naturally attracted by the beauty of Radharani. But she started to chant his name. Because actually what's happening? Because when she saw Krishna, Krishna was changing place. So she was not able to capture Krishna. But when she chanted his name, Krishna became paralyzed. Completely paralyzed. So she was able to discover Krishna and win. But since she continued chanting Krishna's name, Krishna asked her to stop chanting because he could not move anymore. There were too many feelings of ecstasy that were appearing within himself. And this pastime is interesting because it shows that when we chant the name of Krishna, Krishna becomes attracted. So, that is why when we chant the name of Krishna, we obtain the mercy of Krishna and we obtain the intelligence to understand the words of the Lord. Thus, we must, in order to study, chant. If we do not chant with faith, we will not be able to understand anything. We stay completely in ignorance. I don't understand anything. But if you chant with faith, you will see that your bad nature will disappear. Actually, Krishna in this age of Kali appears in the form of the holy name. And the holy name has the Lord, when He comes to perform three things. The first, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta explains that it is for His devotees. Because he comes out of love. It is the conception that everyone can understand that God is love. So if He comes, that is because He loves His devotees. We explained Sunday that the nature of Krishna is that He is more His devotees than Himself. That is why He is controlled by love. So when He comes, it is because He is controlled by love. And naturally, when He comes, He destroys demoniac nature. Because where Krishna is, illusion cannot be, because He is just like the sun. And so, we see that when we chant, we change. If we look our reality before chanting, it can be terrifying. If we see a picture of ourselves before, we can see that we're not at all the same person. Not at all. This is the proof that the holy name destroys the demoniac mentality. Because before, we had demoniac tendencies. And it is a reality. So the more our chanting is pure, the more divine qualities appear. That is why, for example, a devotee who is still subjected to anger, to jealousy, to envy. Oh, this one I don't like. Why is that person there? That means that the chanting didn't do its proper effect. A person doesn't hear one's chanting with devotion and love. And so, that is what we call chanting with offenses. When you chant with inattentiveness, it is an offensive chanting. It comes back actually. A simple example is given through the material relationships. When a husband calls for his wife, he says, "Oh, my darling," and the wife, she becomes all blossomed. But if he is with his smartphone, he says, "Oh, my darling," it won't have the same effect. But in the same way, when you chant without feelings for Krishna and you think about something else, there cannot be effects in the chanting because you don't call Krishna, you don't chant his name, you're somewhere else. And the result is that all bad tendencies that are within yourself, they cannot go away. That is why we keep material desires. Although we practice, we keep material desires. It is because there is no chanting. We chant, but we are somewhere else. So if we want to develop love for Krishna, there must be a reciprocation from Krishna. However, if you chant by being absorbed in something else, how do you want Krishna to come? How do you want that there is like a purification? How do you want for your original feeling to appear? How do you want this to appear? How do you want to see the difference? It's not possible. And it's really interesting that some practice for 10 years, for 15 years, and have surrendered everything, but don't taste in their chanting. It's strange. Why surrender everything if it is not to develop love for Krishna and sleep all the time? All the time they sleep. All the time. They listen and after they start again. It's like it's a disc that has a... Never they will listen. A disc with a scratch. Never, but still they surrendered everything. That means they didn't abandon everything. Actually, there can be an appearance to be dressed as a sannyasi and as a renunciant, but within there's attachment for position, for respect, for so many things. So, our goal is not the dress. It is not the situation. Our goal is the feeling. If we want to progress, we must have an attitude in the hearing. When you chant, when you worship, when you work, otherwise it won't work. Because Krishna reciprocates only with the feelings. If you don't have feelings for Him, there will be no connections. If there's no connection, at one point there's frustration and material desires come back. But at the beginning, you are the problem, it's not Krishna. Krishna gave you everything. But He gave you also the independence, because you're not a machine. So it is up to you to understand your situation. And if you do not want to understand it, you're the eternal soul. You're the eternal soul. Krishna has time. You will come back. And if you don't want to learn in the next life, then He will give you a third life and a fourth life and a fifth life. But it has to come from you. Because He reciprocates. He doesn't force. And even if He would come, He is already there.
Mais si vous n'avez pas l'amour,
But if we don't have love, you cannot see him.
j'ai écouté
I was hearing
une classe d'Indra Maharaj
a class from Indraduna Maharaj,
et il parlait de ce divertissement.
and he was speaking about this pastime of Gopal Guru Goswami.
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, quand il
It's
allait
Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he was going
faire ses ablutions,
to do
pincer
his
sa langue avec les dents.
cleansing.
Parce que, en fait,
He will,
le Saint-Nom,
because the holy name was chanting constantly on his tongue,
et donc le Seigneur,
and so the Lord, during it's a pastime when he was going to the toilet, he could not pronounce the name because it was not a pure place. And there was a young devotee, which was called Gopal. He told him, "But Lord, the holy name is eternally liberated and pure. There's no need to prevent yourself from chanting, because everywhere we can chant." And that's when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he called him, "You are my Guru, Gopal Guru, because you taught me something today." And so, there was a devotee in the room, and he heard that the Lord was dancing on the tongue. So he went in the toilets, and he looked at his tongue. He didn't see Krishna dancing on his tongue. So he came back, and when Indra Maharaj he finished the class, he said, "You have questions?" And he raised his arms, he said, "I was in the toilet, I looked at my tongue, and Krishna doesn't dance on my tongue." The point is that Krishna himself in the heart manifests and reciprocates with his devotee. That is why in the heart it chants automatically on its own, because Krishna is happy to live in the heart of his devotee. And the result is that the name appears also on the tongue. So we cannot see this reality without being a devotee and understand it. So, we must really be serious in our spiritual life, because otherwise we will never be able to realize that we are different from the body. Never. We will never be able to feel that we are inhabitants of Braj. We will never be able to have this realization about this eternal feeling, and if we don't have it, we stay with our feeling of conditioned soul. And what does the conditioned soul want? All of the material things. Always start over again, the same thing. It's like a circle. Attachment, wanting love of this world. It is impossible to avoid this. Impossible. And when we cultivate this, and we have not cultivated love of God, then the Lord becomes even a break to our material desires. And we ask ourselves the question, do I continue or not? We can't see it, but the Vaishnavas, they know this. We even come to have doubts. Is it really what I want? Because actually the reality is that Krishna will not give something bad to his devotee. But if the devotee has desires that are too strong, then he will go astray from the path. And then we take back a material path. And Krishna cannot do anything anymore. So that is why it is not easy. But at the beginning, it is because we are not hearing the chanting. Because if we hear, purification comes. And these desires are destroyed. All desires will be destroyed. And spiritual desires will come. So we must absolutely practice properly. Problems come from our bad practice, because at a certain point, since we have not been serious, taste doesn't come, and we come back in material activities. And from there, we develop more and more attraction for matter again. So we must be careful. There are things that are scientific. That is why the study of the Bhagavad-Gita comprises, we can really understand this nature of action and purify ourselves and attain success. Thank you very much.